Good morning and welcome back to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at MarketSite, we have Chris Maher. He's the CEO at OceanFirst Financial. Thank you so much for joining us at MarketSite today. And we're talking about midterms trade and the real impact. There's no shortage of everything to talk about. So, you know, all indicators continue to point to a strong economy, but it's difficult to assess what the individual consumer is thinking. What's your read on that right now?
Sure, Jill. Nice to be here today.
Thank you.
So when you talk about the individual consumer, you can see weakness in a couple areas that would be kind of maybe flags to watch for. Housing is one, auto sales are another one, but generally the consumer's been really strong. So you're seeing personal incomes rising, you see very strong FICO scores, very good household savings rates. So there appears to be the capacity, and the question is, you know, is the news cycle going to be something that's going to deter them from making the investments they want to make?
Now, everyone's talking about trade and the impact that it has on the market. We see every time there's a tweet or some sort of announcement on the news or in whatever media comes across that we get those fluctuations in the market. From a trade perspective, is it really impacting your commercial clients?
You know, what's impacting is their state of mind more than their actual actions. So they feel very positive about the economy today. They're prepared to make significant investments. We've got a lot of transportation clients that would be making long-term investments, and they're prepared to do so. However, there is some hesitancy as they watch. If trade winds up being a short-term issue, I think we're fine. If trade goes into next year, then I think it could be a different story.
Well, I mean, do you think there could be a global disruption in supply chain?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at these very small pieces and parts that may be part of a larger enterprise, and they take a long time to adjust to. So if you need a secondary source or a secondary supplier, that can take months or sometimes even years to find a substitute, either a supplier for a component or for a material.
When you take a look at the midterms, what's your biggest concern out there in terms of how it could impact the markets or the overall economy?
Sure. You know, I think that the one thing that we're all concerned about is, will it disrupt kind of the animal spirits and the way the consumer's feeling about the economy? So if you saw more market volatility, regardless of the outcome, it doesn't necessarily matter who wins or how many seats, but if that translates into market volatility, if you see people where they're looking at their 401ks and their savings instruments and they feel less wealthy than they felt 3 months ago, and that translates into buying fewer cars or buying fewer houses, I think it's more about the mentality of what's going on than the actual change.
Right. So, I mean, what do you tell customers then, to just kind of continue to think with that long-term outlook?
Sure. We tell them to look at the indicators, right? So I'm fortunate I have the opportunity to serve on an advisory board for the Federal Reserve. I meet with my peers a couple times a year, and when you look at the real indicators of unemployment rates, when you look at wage growth now that we're starting to see for the first time, the underlying numbers are all good, and they would all point to being able to have confidence making investment decisions. So we tell them to look through what might be the short-term volatility or the way markets are moving, and look at what's happening in the real economy.
All right, now, OceanFirst Financial, it's a local regional bank. You're always tackling the digital divide. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so when you look at our industry, like many others, you know, consumers are voting with their feet. They're moving to channels that they're comfortable with. Increasingly, that's things like mobile banking, right? The ability to bank on your mobile device. So we as an industry need to make sure that we're moving our resources to have the best experience in those channels. I'll give you an example. About 25% of our customers primarily use mobile when they interact with us. So when we think about how we're investing in technology and the investment in our bank branches are really important, but when 25% of your customers are using mobile, you better be investing in mobile. And if you don't, you're not going to get across that digital divide. It's not an issue for next week or next quarter, but it is an issue for 3, 4, 5 years from now. You won't have a business if you don't do it right.
Well, here's some consumer feedback, and I wonder if you hear this as well. I think what consumers are looking for, particularly with banking, they want a seamless experience. Whether they're in the branch, they're on desktop, they're on mobile. Right. Do you hear that as well? Oh,
absolutely. Seamless is what it's all about. You know, we look at our account opening on a mobile device, for example, and we're now able to time how long it takes a consumer to open that account. And we're looking at that every day, every week, to try and figure out what points at which the customers are experiencing maybe a difficulty or a question, or they don't see a button in the right place. And it's the fine tuning of that to make sure you've got that experience down that's really important.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us at MarketSite.
Thank you, Jill.
And thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.